Hey everyone, you've seen me address Peter Thiel funded academia is the devil propaganda quite a bit by now, mainly by exposing his prize horse Eric Weinstein as a pointless fraud. Sabine Hossenfelder is another fraud who sings the exact same tune, so she took it upon herself to come to his defense, and it's remarkably pathetic. Let's take a look. For those who have watched my content, it is abundantly clear that Eric Weinstein is a pointless hack LARPing as a physicist with a fake theory of everything that has been thoroughly dismantled by numerous real physicists, two of whom did so in videos of mine. The first was Tim Nguyen, and the second was Christian Ferko in my very recent video outlining the details of his Perimeter Institute visit. Viewers of my content are also aware that Sabine Hossenfelder is a fraud of precisely the same flavor as Eric. Despite her publication history compared to Eric's zero publications, and despite the library of harmless pop-sci fluff that pads out her channel, Sabine is ultimately peddling precisely the same propaganda as Eric. This was exposed in increasing detail over 3 previous videos of mine, which focused on highly irresponsible rhetoric, claiming that most research from the global scientific community is bullshit with zero basis, telling people they shouldn't trust scientists. It's just painfully transparent, knee-jerk anti-establishment propaganda she peddles for cash, whether mere AdSense revenue due to audience capture or the possibility of sharing Eric's paymaster. Those 3 videos I made on Sabine pissed her off something awful, since her reputation was more or less intact before I made them, but once I articulated her fraudulence with such undeniable clarity, she has been quite commonly understood to be a fraud, even by many science-minded people who once trusted her. Her behavior has only gotten worse in the past few months, making her agenda apparent to a cartoonish degree. Here's one from February with a thumbnail that reads, "Academia is communism. Should we defund academia, you guys? It's just useless baggage that is the center of higher learning and scientific productivity." Here's a snippet.
What I said is, I think it's going to happen. Academia will be defunded. And that isn't entirely a bad thing, but it isn't entirely a good thing either. It's going to happen because the current organization of academic research works badly. It's an inefficient use of money, and that's for a simple reason. It's a planned economy. Yes, academia is a planned economy. We're financing it the same way that the communists finance their production chains, with centralized decision-making, committees and 5-year plans. It worked badly for the communists, and it works badly for research.
Fucking hell, what a toddler take. Academia is a planned economy. It's just like communism, that super bad Stalin thing. Sabine, communism is when the government decides. Is everyone in academia employed by the state? No, so it's not communism. You can look at any panel or committee that decides anything democratically and shout planned economy. It's just a group of people deciding what to do with money. Only 18% of grant applications are funded, and the selection occurs through a peer-reviewed process. When competent scientists make decisions as a committee, that's democracy. What the fuck do you propose, Sabine? Should Elon Musk choose what gets funded? Or Peter Thiel? Or maybe your idiot followers can take a vote. The bottom line is that tax money should be spent on projects that benefit the taxpayer. Private funding is designed to benefit business. Cutting public funding shifts the burden of supporting research that benefits the public over towards charitable foundations or private interests who benefit from corporate tax cuts applied to justify the gutting of public research. The private sector benefits tremendously from this, to the public's severe detriment, because the right to determine research areas shifts from the public and democracy to private interests or fascism. Behind any pointless mouthpiece like Sabine whining about communism, you're sure to find a fascist agenda. When asshats like Peter Thiel and Elon Musk whine about academic research being corrupt, a message that requires pawns like Eric and Sabine to propagate, the purpose is to massage public opinion as all the money cut from NIH and NSF under Trump goes indirectly into their pockets as personal and corporate tax breaks. Sabine says huge budget cuts in academia are fine, either because she's a vindictive toddler who couldn't hack it in academia or because she's paid to lie. Here's another one from April. Is Columbia University a dictatorship? Jesus fucking Christ.
Columbia University has been a primary target. On March 7th, Trump's people revoked $400 million in federal research funding from Columbia. A week later, they issued a list of requests that the university would have to fulfill to get the money back. It includes a mask ban and manner rules to prevent disruption in teaching. Within a week, the university basically agreed to comply, though some members of the faculty sued.
Of course, Sabine glosses over the real issue. Formalize, adopt, and promulgate a definition of anti-Semitism. Hey, Columbia, all those students protesting Israel's genocide of Palestinians, formally label them as anti-Semitic and shut that shit down right now, or we'll take money away from you.
The same can be said about some of the protests that US campuses have tolerated that are intimidating some groups of the population, shutting down free speech, or actually calling for violence.
There it is. Sabine has gone full Zionist. Fucking disgraceful. Colleges have been tolerating these protests against genocide for too long. It's so intimidating when young people won't shut up about a genocide that America is paying for. By exercising their free speech, they are shutting down free speech. By calling for an end to genocide, they are calling for violence. Sabine is just falling into line on every single fascist talking point.
But it's right that many things have been going wrong at American universities in the past years, and something needed to happen.
Colleges are stupid poop houses for buttheads, and they deserve to have their money taken away. Awesome take, Sabine. Here's one from May. Hey, you know those devastating budget cuts enacted by Trump that have completely gutted the scientific community, dethroning America as the global leader in science overnight? Maybe they're not so bad, you guys.
Scientists are fleeing the United States because the Trump administration is too anti-science.
What the actual fuck? She now looks and sounds fully animatronic. How is this a person?
According to the results of a Nature poll among scientists in the United States, 3/4 of the survey respondents are considering leaving the United States. This news was widely reported as saying that 3/4 of scientists want to leave the US. How seriously are we to take this? Are scientists really about to leave en masse? Or is this like all the Americans that say they'll move to Canada on each election, but that never seems to happen?
That's adorable, but if you pull your head out of your ass for 5 seconds, you would know that the entire American scientific community is in complete panic mode and brilliant minds are leaving in huge numbers. A position posted at the University of Marseille in France triggered 300 applications from the US, with applicants being referred to as scientific refugees. Countries like Australia and Canada are recruiting aggressively, and apart from Americans going elsewhere, smart people from other countries don't want to come here. For a long time, the US attracted the best international students. Some top departments would have more than 50% foreign grad students and postdocs, selecting from the absolute best in the entire world. Applications for graduate students from abroad are down by over 40% as a response to Trump's measures. These people will go elsewhere and do incredible things for other countries, which means the US loses out big time. Sabine never stops whining about DEI and how everything should be a meritocracy. What about this? Shun the most qualified because patriotism is more important.
If Trump pulls through with his budget cuts, and I think that will most likely be the case, the job market for research positions in the United States is about to crash. People will leave simply because there are no jobs. Is this a good thing or a bad thing? The reactions from scientists that I've seen all think that this is a bad thing. I think it isn't as clear-cut.
All scientists agree that eliminating half of science is bad, but why should Sabine fall into line with quack academics? She has a more nuanced take, also known as pushing a blatant anti-science narrative. Spin it, queen.
The just departed NIH director asserted the NIH has a good return on investment.
Every dollar that NIH gave out in 2024 to a grant is estimated to have returned $2.46 just in a year. That's a pretty darn good return on investment.
The number comes from the 2023 fiscal report of the NIH, and it's not about returns on investment. It means that for every dollar that the NIH spends on, say, salary or lab equipment, other contributors, like, say, universities or private investors, spend $2.46. It tells you nothing about whether the research actually benefited the public besides making money go around. The reality is us that most of tax-paid research almost certainly has a bad return on investment. This is because the entire science funding scheme has a tendency to overinvest into popular areas, whether or not there is something interesting to research there.
This is complete horseshit. The 246 ROI is not making money go around. It represents value creation. That the majority of research isn't profoundly groundbreaking doesn't change the fact that a small fraction of it is, and we have no way of predicting which fraction that will be. Let's say 99% of cancer researchers work their hardest but produce nothing of immense value. That still leaves 1% that make significant discoveries. They get some patents. The patents get licensed and applied, leading to breakthrough products which create value because they improve public health, generating new revenue not just internally but internationally. The multiplier for this kind of breakthrough will not be a factor of 2, but more like 1,000 or even 1,000,000 per patent, which averages out with the larger pile of unproductive research to provide an overall positive return on investment. Sitting around and whining about all the money wasted on the 99% that wasn't revolutionary is completely asinine. This is how science works. Everybody tries their best, and a handful of people do something incredible. And it's especially how R&D works even in the private sector. You fund a bunch of projects, most fail, and a few successful ones generate a shit ton of revenue, and the cycle continues. The more important the research, the bigger the breakthrough you're aiming for, and the higher the failure rate. Energy, medicine, it all works like this. And the US R&D machine had been the best in the world until this administration. Sabine knows all of this. She's just lying to the public for money, and it's easy as hell.
I recently angered some people by saying that if I had any choice in the matter, I wouldn't want my taxes to pay for research on the description of smell in the English literature.
Take an obscure paper that almost nobody would care about, tell people, look at this crap you're paying for, and a bunch of sheep are infected with a virus telling them to spread the notion that science is nothing but corrupt and wasteful. That there is sporadic corruption and that the distribution of huge amounts of federal money can be infected with politics is inevitable, and there is room for nuanced criticism. But Sabine saying, hey, let's torch the whole building, sure as fuck ain't it.
That the Trump administration is no longer willing to play this game is a very interesting development, because a very foreseeable consequence is that the number of research publications with American affiliations will dramatically drop. I hope that this will induce a long necessary shift to better measures of research impact.
Sabine hopes that taking away all the money for research will lead to better research. What a big brain take from a big brain lady. This is bananas. The benefits of NIH research are not even remotely debatable. Modern medicine has increased the human lifespan and decreased morbidity dramatically even over the past few decades. Curing genetic diseases, revolutionary surgical techniques that save lives, where the fuck do you think this shit comes from? So to whine about ROI exclusively is a disservice to all the lives saved from medical research. But again, if you want to fixate on money, this is still dog shit economics. Here's a JAMA paper calculating the GDP loss over time due to the NIH cuts. It's $8 trillion, 16 times more than the money saved. This shit is indefensible no matter how you slice it. So for Sabine to be pretending there's anything positive here is similarly indefensible and reeks of paid propaganda. Speaking of propaganda, Sabine is so clearly aligned with the oligarchy in defaming federally funded science that she will flat out lie about where science is coming from. Last year, she put out this video talking about a nuclear fusion startup.
You all know I'm excited about nuclear fusion, don't you? Because of all the technology that's currently under development, this is the most likely one to dramatically change the world in the near future.
Sabine is so excited about fusion, and all the best fusion research is done privately, right? Not in stupid academia that shouldn't get any money ever.
So I'm happy about this new German startup. They called themselves Proxima Fusion, and the news is that they just received $20 million in funding to get on the way. Wendelstein 7X is what's called a stellarator, and the new startup wants to use a more sophisticated version of that, a quasi-isodynamic stellarator. But to me, this ISO whatever stellarator thing sounds like a very promising path to pursue, though maybe they could come up with a more catchy name.
Pretty neat, huh? Stuff like this only happens when you're a super cool rogue private sector genius man like Elon Musk or something. Stupid publicly funded scientists could never come up with it. Except they did. This is all based on the work of researchers at the Max Planck Institute for Plasma Physics, which receives the majority of its funding from the German federal and state governments. It's almost like Sabine is knowingly attributing public sector work to private companies in an attempt to make it seem like the latter is better than the former at getting science done. Revolting. And finally, Sabine is one of the frauds associated with the co-opting of the term war on science, as outlined by a collection of pointless essays cobbled together by Lawrence Krauss. This term is supposed to refer to the ultra-conservative faction that is hijacking our political system and terminating important research, denying climate change, trying to erode the separation of church and state, hiring science-denying buffoons to head every federal institution, that sort of thing. But according to this ragtag crew, that's not the problem at all. There's Lawrence Krauss, who never recovered from allegations of sexual misconduct and praise of Jeffrey Epstein, Richard Dawkins, Jerry Coyne, and Steven Pinker, who humiliated themselves in the Freedom from Religion Foundation fiasco that I covered in another video, pointless fraud and eugenics sympathizer Peter Boghossian, monumental dickbag supreme Jordan Peterson, and any other tool with an academic pedigree willing to whine about trans people like they're the apocalypse. These people claim the real war on science is something else entirely. According to Sabine's glowing recommendation, the real war on science is cancel culture, DEI, erosion of free speech. College is stupid, you guys. Look at the table of contents. This is basically a collection of hack conservative talking points that may as well be rants from Joe Rogan guests disguised as poignant socio-political commentary. Anyone with their name attached to this thing should be ashamed of themselves. Genetically Modified Skeptic made a great video on this, which I will link below, so check that out if you want more details on this manure pile of a book. Now, I gave you all of this additional context on Sabine beyond the first 3 videos I already made about her because it has to be as clear as humanly possible what Sabine's agenda is and how it is flawlessly aligned with Eric's paymaster. Ultimately, it is a war between oligarchs and reality. It is a markedly anti-intellectual crusade that seeks to undermine any and all legitimate sources of knowledge. Universities are the last bastions of intellectualism in this idiocracy, so they must be demonized. Peer review is corrupt. If it's in a legitimate journal, don't trust it. Scientists are shills. They're just burning through tax dollars, churning out bullshit, and they'll say anything to defend their cozy and lucrative positions, scraping by on $50K a year. University students aren't passionate, free-thinking individuals who protest terrorism from the American-Israeli war machine and neutralize toxic oligarchs trying to transfer every last dollar into their own pockets. They're crazy, woke, trans, anti-Semitic radicals who support jihadis that did 9/11. Don't trust experts and definitely don't get an education. Establishment bad. Rogue individuals paid by the aforementioned oligarchs good. This is the playbook for Thiel and others like him. Craft a manipulative script and bankroll individuals whose only job is to regurgitate it and infect the public like a virus in order to control their voting habits and consumer behavior. The same goes for using communism as a dirty word. Completely unfettered predatory capitalism is the vehicle by which a tiny handful of ultra-elites have seen their wealth balloon to a cartoonish degree over the last decade or two, while the middle class is on the verge of collapse and record numbers are below the poverty line. When the private sector has near total control of the government, the only way to continue this transfer of wealth is to get the public to whine about big government as a smokescreen for the continued dismantling of any institution that has the ability to regulate the private sector. Any challenge to this form of predatory capitalism is labeled as communism and demonized, to produce within the public a Pavlovian response to avoid any line of thinking that could unite the public against the true enemy and engage in consumer habits that will topple their empire. If widespread scientific results challenge the profit margins of any enormous industry, just get the public to recoil at the word consensus and associate it with corruption so that any scientific field can be rejected at face value with the push of a button. Let facts and reason deteriorate until we arrive at complete dystopia. Anything that benefits the people and not the oligarchy is evil. Anything that acts as a legitimate source of information in opposition to a desired narrative is corrupt. Any genuine intellectual who speaks in opposition to this power dynamic must be smeared and have their influence outweighed by figures who promote the propaganda of the oligarchy. Everyone knows that's Eric. The connection isn't hidden at all. Officially, On paper, he's a managing director for Peter Thiel, a totally meaningless job title, which translates to being some guy who spews lies on the internet. But I propose to you that Sabine is such a figure as well. Her rhetoric is 100% identical to every motive I just outlined. The war on woke science. Cutting public funding for research is good. Scientific journals are bad. Academia is bad. Anti-Zionism is bad. It's so flawlessly aligned with Eric's rhetoric and Thiel's agenda that if she isn't getting paid by him, he's getting the freebie of a lifetime. Now, with all of this context covered, let's take a look at Sabine's disgraceful defense of Eric, prompted specifically by my video with Christian Ferko, exposing his pointlessness from the perspective of academia and the vacuousness of his fake theory. Stunning hypocrisy. Physicists are afraid of Eric Weinstein, and they should be. Remember, Eric was invited to give a talk under the condition that he not tell anyone he was there. And also remember, multiple physicists have explained with extreme clarity how geometric unity is literally nothing, an April Fool's joke he propped up as revolutionary on podcasts while hiding from academics as long as humanly possible. Apparently, when real scientists and effective science communicators share this kind of objectively factual information, it makes Sabine very, very mad. Let's take a look. Wait, sorry, that was one of Sabine's shitty music videos. Here's the right one.
I watched this recent episode of Eric and Sean Carroll on Piers Morgan and read the comments from all those who piled on afterwards, and boy, was this ugly. I can't believe the fucking hypocrisy of these people.
Wow, look at how angry she is. She must be right, because she's so angry. Anyone who craps on Eric for being a fucking buffoon who acted like an immature toddler is automatically a hypocrite because I say so.
I've known Eric for almost 20 years. He's a good guy. If you take away one thing from this video, let it be that Sabine said Eric's a good and fairly normal person, in contrast to a lot of others who think it's okay to shit on people they know nothing about. I've seen an enormous amount of hate thrown at Eric that he doesn't deserve.
Eric is not a good guy, and he's not even remotely normal. He's a disgusting fraud who peddles propaganda for cash. And since this jab at people who shit on others they know nothing about is aimed at me first and foremost, no, Sabine, I know more than enough about Eric to shit all over him until the end of time. And you too. You both deserve every ounce of hate that you get, and it's only gonna get worse the longer you keep up this charade. Eric is a fraud who polarizes people against science and legitimate sources of information, just like you. You're toxic crybullies who try to tear everything down and then play the victim when anyone reflects your energy back onto you. It's pathetic.
Eric has a theory of everything, like all other people I know. His is called geometric unity. He's been talking about this already 20 years ago. It's his life's work, basically. In 2021, he wrote up some notes about it. Physicists were not particularly impressed.
Pretending that every single person you know has a theory of everything is a bit hyperbolic, don't you think? You're just downplaying the significance of a complete fraud pretending to have a theory of everything when he doesn't, as though it's common practice among academics. It isn't. And physicists are not impressed by it, not because of whatever closed-mindedness you're about to imply, it's because it's not a real theory. End of story.
I never looked into this in any detail because I'm not interested in unification ideas and I think it's a waste of time. I don't see why the fundamental forces of nature have to be unified, and I have no idea why so many people are obsessed with this, but I want to try and give you a brief idea what this is all about.
You have no idea why forces should be unified? Maybe it's because they can and have been successfully unified. Electromagnetism was itself an early unification with blatantly obvious practical application, and electroweak theory has been massively successful. This is the most pathetic cop-out imaginable. 3 of the 4 fundamental forces have been unified, so it's not that weird to attempt the 4th. Next time you see someone 3/4 done with a marathon, jog alongside them and say, "What the hell are you doing? Why are you so obsessed with running? You're never going to get anywhere, especially not the end of this race that you're almost done with." Whether or not quantum gravity will be achieved is not the point. What's important is that this is Sabina's dogshit excuse to avoid having to say what she thinks of GU. If she endorses it, she's an instant fraud because GU is universally known to be absolutely nothing among anyone with legitimate physics knowledge. But she can't condemn it either because that would be throwing her colleague in fraudulence under the bus, and Papa Thiel can't have that. So instead, it's this song and dance. I didn't look at it, and I never will, because who cares about unifying forces? Who cares about this enormous part of theoretical physics that has already been massively successful? But even though I didn't look at it, which means it very well could be absolutely nothing, and it is, you're all still super mean hypocrites for shitting all over my pal Eric. Shame on you. But also, are you sure you haven't taken a look? Are you really, really sure?
Well, first, maybe let me make a comment about what Eric just said. You complained that there hasn't been any substantive discussion about geometric unity. I think that's because no one has any idea what you're talking about in the first place. I think you're severely underestimating the communication problem, and you have to work much, much harder on that. And yeah, I watched your lecture, and I think that among the 500,000 people who watched your video, I'm probably one of those who have a pretty good starting point in understanding what you're even talking about, and even I only have a very vague idea what you're even up to.
Wow, it's almost like Sabine is a fucking liar who will say absolutely anything to push a narrative. She watched that entire dumb lecture, the one Eric insisted for years was so good that he didn't need to write a paper, and despite being the physics super genius that she is, it was all gibberish to her. That's funny, maybe it was so forgettable that she genuinely forgot, huh?
Eric sees this differently. He thinks that no one has yet done it the right way, which is possible. If this is how he wants to spend his life, that's fine with me. I won't attempt to explain exactly what Eric's doing. I'll just try to give you my stupid girl summary.
Eric doesn't spend his life doing any of this. He's not a physicist. He spends his life spewing horse shit on podcasts, and you won't attempt to explain what he's doing, because if you did, it would have to be about how he's never done any physics and just spews horse shit on podcasts. But nice attempt at self-deprecation as a cover.
Einstein's theories work with a four-dimensional space-time. The space-time is described by what's called the metric tensor that measures the relations between directions. So the metric tensor has 4 times 4 equals 16 entries. But it's symmetric, so only 10 of those entries are different. You can just ignore all the words that you didn't understand. The number 10 is the relevant part. It just so happens that one of the first and probably most studied groups for unification is SO10, and that also has a 10 in it. So Eric postulates that these two tensors are somehow related. Basically, he doubles the gravitational part of Einstein's theory and takes the one version to be the generator of this group that gives you something like SO10. Devils in the details. By this I mean that in all fairness, Eric's idea is a bit sketchy. But honestly, I don't doubt that with some effort you can somehow make the maths work out. So this is roughly what Eric's working on, I believe. It's all fairly unremarkable, really. The mathematics is pretty close to what physicists are using already, and it's totally in line with all the other nonsense that physicists in the foundations now work on.
Sabine, once again, I thought you said you didn't read GU and had no idea what it's about. Funny then how you offer this half-assed attempt at legitimizing it, huh? It's unremarkable, so it's not up to your standards. But it's just like all the other crappy physics out there that's so far beneath you, despite you not being good enough to hack it in academia. So instead of elevating GU, she tries to pretend that all of physics is absolutely nothing, just like GU. How clever. No, Sabine, fake theories from frauds are not in line with real theories from real physicists. Sorry.
Yes, Eric's work is far from complete. Yes, he doesn't have a Lagrangian, and he hasn't actually solved any problem, and he hasn't explained how anomaly cancellation works, and other than some hand-wavy, there ought to be new particles somewhere, he doesn't have tangible predictions. But then, Eric's only one person who wrote up some notes. If he had wasted some millions of tax money on hiring postdocs and writing papers about it, then he could have easily papered over these shortcomings, just like everyone else in that area.
There it is, right back to her bullshit script. She flat out admits that GU is nothing, citing numerous details revealing that she definitely knows exactly what is and what isn't in the fake paper she pretends she never read, thereby totally contradicting her supreme confusion about all the backlash on Eric, and then launches straight into whining about taxpayer dollars. When Eric acts like a complete fraud, at least it's for free, not like all the stupid university science you pay for that is just as pointless as GU because I say so. Unbelievable.
And this is why this pisses me off so much. Sean totally knows that most of his colleagues work on similarly flaky stuff. It's just been covered up by more working hours.
It's a cover-up, you guys. Sean knows he's a pointless loser just like Eric, and so are all of his colleagues. But they keep it up to get that sweet, sweet public grant money that's evaporating at record speed under Trump, while poor Eric has to settle for millions of Thiel bucks. How deplorable. So according to Sabine, anyone who publishes real science is a loser, and even Eric pushing his fake science is a loser. That leaves only Sabine herself, the last remaining trusted source of information in science. Funny how that works, huh? By the way, if you want to know the real cover-up, in 2021, Sabine published Tim Nguyen's article debunking GU on her blog, as Tim recently reminded her on Twitter. This is what that blog post used to look like thanks to Wayback. What happens if you try to search for it now? That's funny. Where did it go? Get rid of that paper trail, Sabine.
The literature's full of papers without proper predictions, without Lagrangians, ill-defined operators or problems that will be solved in some future work that never comes.
Total bullshit. Find me a paper full of operators that aren't properly defined, Sabine. You can't and won't. Lagrangians? Does every physics paper need Lagrangians? Or are you taking advantage of your viewers not knowing what that means? And there certainly are papers that don't make predictions that are as robust as others, but it's still night and day from GU with glaring holes and inconsistencies that have been pointed out countless times, something which Eric consistently dodges with the help of frauds like you.
Well, Sean, why don't you talk for a little bit about all these supposed ADS-CFT predictions for condensed matter, this or that, which were supposed to revolutionize superconductivity? Whatever happened to that?
Oh snap, physics jargon smackdown. Nobody watching understands what she said, but she must be right because angry physics lady is angry. So what's she talking about? String theory gave us something remarkable called holography, or ADS-CFT, which sometimes lets us do really hard calculations in strongly coupled field theory that we can't do any other way. Dam T. Sun and Andrei Starinets used this cool string theory tool to do an approximate calculation of a real measurable physical thing called the viscosity of the quark-gluon plasma. Then people measured this thing at Brookhaven, and the result computed using this string theory tool was the most accurate out of all available proposals. Here's a quote from Joseph Conlin's book, Why String Theory? While brute force could not be used, there had existed analytical approaches to computing this viscosity, which were based on using techniques applicable at weak coupling and extrapolating to strong coupling. Both the ADS-CFT approach and the weakly coupled analytical approaches gave estimates for the shear viscosity of the quark-gluon plasma. These estimates were then tested by measurements at actual experiments, such as the relativistic heavy ion collider at Brookhaven National Laboratory. The surprise was that the measurement of the viscosity disagreed badly with that computed in the traditional approach, but agreed approximately with that computed using ADS-CFT. The viscosity of the quark-gluon plasma was surprisingly lower than expectations, and the only approach that seemed to get it right was that of ADS-CFT. So yeah, it was only an approximation, but this is a classic case where string theory tools made a prediction that was tested, and the stringy prediction was the best one out there. There has been an enormous amount of work on trying to use similar holographic techniques to understand aspects of condensed matter systems like superconductivity, such as with this review. Sabine can claim that this direction was not as successful as people had once hoped, and that might even be true, but it undeniably led to new insights about superconductivity using string theory tools, and it was based on the above demonstrable success. Comparing this to you is completely idiotic. So when frauds like Eric and Sabine ask, where are all the predictions? The correct response is, well, how about that one, asshole? Loud sarcasm is not a refutation of real science, and it only works when the people you're lecturing have no idea what the fuck you're talking about, which is 100% of both of their audiences. Does this vindicate string theory as the next huge paradigm in physics? No, but it proves that anyone who pretends it's all just smoke and mirrors to steal grant money is a lying fraud.
And just exactly how is string theory defined anyway?
How is string theory defined? Are you just admitting that you don't know what string theory is? The basic definition is taught to third-year undergrads. You can check this MIT open courseware on string theory for undergrads, find the recommended textbook by Zweibach, and read it for yourself, Sabine. It's defined simply enough in one line. The supersymmetric version is more complicated and taught in graduate school, and it has its limitations, but it is well defined. For comparison, even the standard model is not fully understood non-perturbatively or at a fully rigorous mathematical level, and not even frauds like Eric and Sabine will shit on that. In fact, the Yang-Mills existence and mass gap problem is an unsolved problem pertaining to the standard model that is one of the 7 millennium problems you can win $1 million for solving. So yes, anyone who is intellectually honest and uses the same standards for well-definedness that are agreed upon in physics must admit that string theory is well-defined. There's a little more grandstanding with technical jargon, but I think it will be better addressed in conversation with a physicist in another video, so let's move on.
They say that they want people to think outside the box, but if someone actually does it, they're like, nah, not this way. You don't talk like us. You don't walk like us. We don't like the people you play with. Therefore, we'll not look at your ideas.
Sabine, stop pretending nobody looked at Eric's ideas. We've checked. It's nothing. It's a fake paper he uses to posture as a genius for gullible lay people. That's why he doesn't talk like real physicists, because he isn't one and doesn't understand what they do. And yes, we don't like the people Eric plays with, like the oligarchs who are trying to undermine democracy and squeeze every last dollar out of the working class. You're getting a little too transparent here.
And then you get all these people piling onto each hate parade. The groupthink is so thick. Like, they all think it's fine to hate on Eric because they expect their colleagues to cheer on them for doing so. And those who think that maybe Eric's idea isn't so bad keep their mouth shut.
Yeah, who are the physicists who think Eric isn't a gigantic fraud? We can't see them because they're scared to speak up or because they don't exist. And for fuck's sake, this groupthink accusation is absolutely hilarious. You promote groupthink, Sabine. You spread this propaganda that gets clueless idiots to despise academia, and they parade this brainwashing all over the internet. I see it everywhere, and it's because of people like you and Eric. You are the cult. You are the social poison. The people who push back on your bullshit are the ones who actually care about academic pursuits and intellectual integrity.
Like with this recent episode about Perimeter Institute. In his Morgan appearance, Eric said vaguely he's been visiting some physics institute and giving a talk. Someone leaked later that this was Perimeter Institute and spread a rumor that they didn't want to be associated with him and that they made a deal that Eric would donate money in return.
Spread a rumor? No. That was an explicit condition of his visit. If it hadn't been, he would have name-dropped Perimeter on Piers. Of course, Sabine doesn't mention me by name, kind of like James Tour referring to me as he who shall not be named, like I'm a demon or something. Most of the people I debunk avoid mentioning me in the hopes that as few of their followers as possible will look for my content and see what frauds they are. But my video with Christian is very obviously what she's talking about, and it is factually the case that Perimeter contractually prohibited Eric from publicizing the visit.
This is all bullshit, and if they'd stopped and thought for a second, they'd have known it's bullshit. This just isn't how seminar invitations work.
Yeah, it usually isn't, because pointless frauds like Eric usually aren't invited anywhere. But again, that's not what happened this time, objectively.
Also, let me tell you that when I give talks, I frequently do not mention publicly where I'm going for reasons.
Nope, you can't do that. Eric was on Piers after he was at Perimeter, so it definitely wasn't any kind of a safety thing or whatever you're implying. He was not allowed to tell people that he had been there.
I also knew that Eric's been giving a bunch of physics lectures in the past years about which you find nothing online. Presumably also for reasons.
Oh yeah? He probably has given super awesome physics talks at all kinds of great places because trust me, bro, no thanks.
The story from Perimeter Institute is, to my understanding, that the person who invited him feared for their career. This tells you how sick this entire community is, that people are afraid to do as much as express interest in a new theory.
No, they were embarrassed to have him there, but were hoping they would get money. If an individual person feared for their career, how the fuck would prohibiting Eric from mentioning the name of the institution have any bearing on that? Think before you speak.
Then there's Brian Keating, who deserves credit for not chickening out and for standing with Eric, even though that made people crap on Brian too. Then there's Kurt Jaimungo, who courageously published a very long video about Eric's theory and also interviewed Eric, which led to this following exchange.
Man, you're just going to bat for all these pointless lackeys, huh? Brian and Kurt aren't courageous, they're ball lickers. Play your clip and see for yourself, Sabina.
I haven't seen such novel ideas from a single person, ever. And I don't know if anyone else will tell you this, but what you've done is remarkable, man.
I don't even know how to be with that, to be honest. Look, thank you.
And again, I saw people jump on Kurt and criticizing him just for talking to Eric.
Yes, Kurt was just talking to Eric, that's all. He totally wasn't engaging in intellectually bankrupt aggrandizement by proxy. Eric's whole shtick is pretending to be a super genius, so let's feed that label to him while he sits there with his pathetic Saint Bernard face, finally getting the recognition he so sorely deserves. At last, redemption for this poor, misunderstood super genius. Jesus Christ.
But Kurt is right. It's remarkable. Eric's ideas as remarkable as the ideas of thousands of other people, each of whom has spent years and years of their life on it, and whom you've never heard anything about.
Holy shit, that's quite the 180. Now Eric's ideas are remarkable? Hang on, let's rewind the tape.
So this is roughly what Eric's working on, I believe. It's all fairly unremarkable, really. Kurt is right. It's remarkable.
And this moron has the balls to talk about hypocrisy.
In any case, I think what's really happening here is that a lot of people who work in the foundations of physics are very afraid that Eric is exposing how rotten their entire field is. This is why they're trying hard to discredit him. But the truth is that Eric's idea isn't any better or worse than all the other crap they're working on. The only difference is that he hasn't wasted as much of your tax money on it.
And there it is. Big bad establishment is scared of super awesome Eric the Rebel. His not a real theory is just as good or better than real theories, but scientists can't handle getting their grant money scam exposed by this pointless oligarch mouthpiece. Did I do a good job, Peter? Can I get my allowance now? Fucking pathetic. As I said earlier, I can't prove that Thiel pays Sabina. I'm not a detective. I don't know how to prove that kind of thing. All I can do is expose the vile deception in Sabina's rhetoric and point out how it is 100% lockstep with the narrative Eric pushes as Thiel's representative. This is Peter Thiel, who funds Inference Review, where James Tour and Discovery Institute personnel publish all their dogshit hit pieces on chemistry and biology. This is Peter Thiel, co-founder and chairman of Palantir, which was handpicked by Trump to collect data from Americans to wield Orwellian surveillance powers. This is Peter Thiel, who essentially personally chose the vice president of America. The guy has a scary amount of access and influence in this administration, and billions of dollars with which to manifest his most twisted desires. I'm going to continue operating as though Sabine is on Thiel's payroll, because to me, it's clear as day. The pageantry in this video, the fake outrage, the white knighting for something allegedly so unremarkable that she can't even bother to read it. Yet she has the precise script to come to its defense. All of it just reeks of calculated damage control as Thiel protects his investments. But in the off chance that I'm wrong, we can still recognize how disgusting Sabine's rhetoric is and how flawlessly aligned it is with the alternate reality Thiel pushes, while considering his specific goals in doing so. In case I haven't made myself perfectly clear as to what these goals are, allow me to reiterate one last time. Democracy is imperiled when a disproportionate amount of money and decision-making power is in the hands of a few oligarchs. That's fascism. The goal is fascism and a continued transfer of wealth into the oligarchy while the entire middle class gets shoved under the poverty line. That's it. That's the basis for the assault on intellectualism, on research aimed at public benefit, on protests of the military-industrial complex. All of it. Unfortunately, the campaign to convince Americans that science is hopelessly corrupt is working well. In record numbers, people are accepting the transfer of decision-making power on scientific and economic issues from their hands into the hands of a fascist cabinet allied with corrupt oligarchs, who are ruthlessly hell-bent on removing regulations and panels of real experts in order to increase their own wealth and power. The corruption is not in science, but in the government, due to a death grip from the private sector that has completely asphyxiated an institution that once served the American people, an institution that historically subsidized education for the masses, that appropriately taxed the private sector, and that prided itself in elevating the middle class. Those times are gone, and it's only getting worse. Anyone who aligns themselves with this activity for profit is disgusting and should be mocked into oblivion. Fortunately, by siding with Eric Weinstein, Sabine has made it absolutely undeniable to more people than ever that this is exactly what she's doing. So that's it for Sabine Hossenfelder and her secret boyfriend Eric Weinstein. They're both hoping that the internet will stop interneting and just let them keep their grift afloat until America becomes Peter Thielistan. But unfortunately for them, that ain't gonna happen, and we should all emphatically remind them of that as often as possible. Until next time.